welcome or welcome back. Welcome. At this point, folks, it is what it is. No, that's not what we're going with. Fuck. Welcome or welcome back to Ready Nerd Go, Graphic Policies Tabletop RPG centric podcast. My name's Alex. This is Enko, and this is the first time doing this intro today that I haven't fucked up, so we're gonna keep it. It's been a late night for both of us for different reasons. So here we are. This is what we're gonna do.
Yep.
We didn't actually have any idea what we were going to be talking about for this show until we probably a couple of days ago. We thought, I know what we can do. We try and plan things out, and it was entirely because of an RPG session we were having at the comic shop where I think 20% of the party died.
Yep. And it was quite nearly the entire thing.
Yep. It so we were playing Shadow of the Demon Lord, which probably means about as much to you as it does to me, in that it's just a game to play with a character that I've created. And my clockwork character, so effectively a steampunk robot with a soul, failed a death roll, and I blew up, taking at least one other person with me, and almost a third, very nearly a third. But I just happened to roll right on that dice instead. So it saved him. It just didn't save me and Buddy.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it happened and we were like, oh no. And then shortly after, this would be a great topic for the podcast.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk about character death, and I'm possibly unique in that I found it absolutely hilarious that this character died. It's one of the first character deaths that I think I've actually had that was unexpected, and I wasn't hoping the character would die.
Yeah.
Not that any of the other ones have actually died yet, but I've got at least two suicidal characters around, and just not this one. So for we're going to talk about character death, and I'm not sure why I'm still talking, but how many times as a GM have you actually been able to murder the entire party in one session?
Well, I've never done a full TPK, total party kill, but I've definitely gotten close a few times. And for the record, like I never go into a game like trying to kill the entire party. My general philosophy on it is I want the party to succeed, like I want the players to succeed, but I want them to struggle for it. Like I want them to like get there by the skin of their teeth, and riding that line is difficult, especially with random generation, because like the event that killed two and nearly three members of the party last session was the result of entirely nothing I had planned. They were, going through a dungeon trying to find stuff. I rolled to see if a random monster would appear. It did. I rolled to see what type of monster would appear. It's like, okay, this is about like a average-ish challenge for their power level. And then they had been rolling 20 plus on their dice the entire session, pretty
Yeah,
much up
it
to this moment.
it was hilarious because every time we would be rolling, a lot of us were rolling a d20 plus a d6 for whatever we were doing. So it was very easy to get above 20 in theory for a lot of us. And then all of a sudden, when it really mattered, none of us could seem to roll anything at all.
It was a really good example of the type of emergent story play that I really like about RPGs, because I didn't plan for this situation to happen. I'd put the tools in place that made it happen, but it wasn't something that I had scripted. It wasn't, okay, they're going to go in this alcove, a bunch of burrowing centipedes are going to pop up and kill a couple of them. No, it was, okay, we're at this part, it's time for a random roll. Okay, that triggered this, make another roll. Okay, now they're trying to handle this situation. Oh, the rolls compounded, and now two characters are dead, a third one's on death door, and the newcomer has made a terrible impression on the rest of the party.
Yeah, the newcomer, ironically, is the second character played by the player because in the very first session, his original character got turned into a zombie,
Yeah.
and I proceeded to bash its head in and steal its sword.
Which did do you a lot of good until
And
you then died.
yeah, and in my defense, you rolled a nat 20 on that, so it burrowed right in the burrowing centipede, burrowed into the clockwork, and I failed the roll because the damage was exactly the right amount to kill me, and I had declined to heal earlier.
Yeah.
Which again, I found hilarious when I thought about it. I was like, and a part of me was like, well, maybe I can ask if we can retcon. No, 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 no. So it's it's a hilarious moment. In general, sorry, my cat jumped up. It's a hilarious moment in general. But what I think we were going to wanted to talk about with a character death is the opportunities it presents after the fact. So obviously, if you're not having fun, you can say, no, you know what, my character died. I'll wait to the next game. If you're in a group that plays a bunch of games at any one time, like ours,
Hmm.
if you're just not having fun with a group, so you know what, I think I might take a break for a bit. Maybe I'll come back in a bit. Let me think about a character, etc., etc. Or you just don't come back. However, what arguably is the bright side of it is that it allows you to create a new character with a bit more understanding of the rules if you're like me and new, or maybe it allows you to create a character with a bit more integration with the story once you finally figure out what the hell is going on.
Yeah. It's there's there's a few different ways that it generally tends to go, because normally we tend to play systems that you can whip up a new character, assuming you knowing what you're doing. You can whip up a new character usually before the fight is done, let alone
Yeah,
before the session is over. And then it just becomes the balancing act of, okay, when can I, as the GM, plausibly introduce this character to the rest of the party, so they're not just popping up out of nowhere and going, "Hi, I'm Bob 2, here to replace Bob 1."
the and that's the thing. Like ultimately, that's exactly what it is. Is that Bob 2 is showing up to replace Bob 1. However, you've got the for you, the GM,
Mm,
the fun of intertwining it, and sometimes a player might have an idea. Oh, hey, how about he comes in because of X, Y, Z, and he joins the party because of A, B, and C, and we're like, yeah, that works.
yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't have to be rocket science. Like you don't have to take multiple leaps and say, well, I don't know if my character would do that. Just shut up and accept it. It's one of those things where we know what the end goal is, that we all want to, we're going to do this mission together. Whether this character is welcomed by the group or not is ultimately irrelevant. He's going to be part of the group.
Yeah,
What you choose to do with it after that is on you.
there's been a couple of times, not lately, thankfully, but there's a couple of times in my earlier GMing days where we would introduce a new character, and for whatever reason, the person that had made the new character had maybe like, oh, I want the group to like win me over to want to, adventure with them, and like my character doesn't have a reason to adventure with them, so like he needs to be convinced to go out with these people, and then we'd waste like 2 solid hours of play just dancing around. Okay, like, well, I don't know, what can you offer me? Well, I don't know, why should I trust you? And at this
At,
point,
at a certain
ugh,
at a certain point, had I been one of the players who had to woo, I feel like as a player I would have been tired of it, and then as a character, like, you know what? Either you come with us or you don't. I don't care.
yeah, at this point, I pretty much just boil it down to, you're making a new character. Perfect. They're a complete blank slate. They better have a reason to want to adventure with this group, or else,
Exactly.
oh no, this character doesn't want to be the focus of the story. Okay, he wanders off into the mist, and whatever character you create that is interested in actually in being involved with the
Yeah.
story, they can come in.
I think we may have touched on that before, in that when you're creating your characters after death or whatever, you've
Hmm.
got to. think of a very valid, not even a valid reason, but you just have to accept that, hey, look, we're here to play a game where we go fight the big dragon. Pun not intended for Dungeons and Dragons, where you fight the big dragon. And for whatever reason, your character wants to do that. It doesn't matter if they've been told they have to do it, if they don't actually want to do it, but they've been commanded and they don't have a choice. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, their goal is to join the party, help them, and fight the dragon.
Yeah.
That you don't want to have to, well, maybe I'll come, maybe I won't. No, you know, we don't have time for this shit. You're coming. Why you're coming is up to you, but you're coming. And this circles back to a little bit in regards to what I was talking with Anko with before we started recording. The character that I'm recreating, I was really enjoying playing a Clockwork. I enjoyed that aspect of things. I don't normally play non-human characters or non-organic characters. I mean, in fairness, I think everything I've played so far has been a human apart from one goblin.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I was like, well, maybe I'll give the Clockwork another go. I was kind of enjoying it. So how do I work in the fact that another Clockwork has just shown up? So I ran by him the idea of what if this Clockwork is in service to a Clockwork gob that was jokingly referenced in the last session, and because two Clockworks died within seconds of each other, this person or this being has been sent to investigate why they died. And after having found out, it's like, well, I guess I'll help finish their mission. And we're like, great, that answers why, how, and why he's going to continue helping and genuinely be part of the party, as
Yep.
opposed to the other one who just happened to be there and isn't really part of the party, so doesn't really want to partake. I'm going to make the argument in character that, well, now that since I'm here for them, I should get both their shares of the loot.
Better pull both your twice the weight then.
Yeah, well, and obviously it's not going to work. It's going to be one of those joking statements, but
Yeah.
yeah,
And
no,
that is one of the nice things too about the way I structure this game, because I'm running I'm running it through in like an old school mega dungeon just because I've never done it, and normally you would use like an OSR system to do that kind of thing.
hey,
But
so what is OSR? Because I don't know, so I'm going to assume
oh,
other people.
that is a messy topic. It's
That's a can of
generally
worms that you didn't know you were opening.
generally speaking, and there's a few different opinions and sub-factions and all that kind of stuff, but generally speaking, OSR stands for Old School Renaissance or Old School Revival, and it's a system of games that generally focus around like emulating early D&D, like first edition, second edition, advanced. I'm not really part of the sphere, so I don't really know like too much about the fine details of it, but there's a lot of systems nowadays that are classified as being, part of the OSR movement, which generally means fairly rules light, character creation is fairly quick, character lethality is usually pretty high, and it kind of apes a lot of the old structures of early D&D, which, you know, does play very differently from modern D&D.
It, I don't get me wrong, I'm really enjoying the more deadly aspect of it. Like I think when a character dies in the first session, we're like, ah, shit, I liked him. It was a lesson that maybe we should have more than one character rolled up at any one time.
Yeah.
But again, like, so I think I was in a more of a unique situation. They died at the end of the session. Had they not died at the end of the session, I still would have been struggling to roll up a new character because
Oh,
usually
100%.
I'm working, so I don't really have time to 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 sit down and focus on that. And so often it's a case of people, oh, hey, how about this? Yep, great, that sounds good. How about, yep, great, that sounds good, which
Oh,
works. But
there's a few different things you can do as the GM to kind of assist in that. Like with you, when your character dies right near the end of the session, it's okay. You can start brainstorming it, and especially with the way we're playing, where like in world weeks are passing between each dungeon delve, it's really easy for us to start the next session and say, okay, like 2 weeks ago, your character got here, started talking to locals, you guys got all of the initial why am I in the party awkwardness out of the way.
Yeah,
But then there's also options like when our friend's character died in the first session, he died fairly early on in the session, and like his character turned into a zombie. So it's like, okay, he's not really, it's going to take him some time to come up with a new character. He's also not super familiar with the system, so even with, 2 hours left, he's probably still not going to have a character ready yet. I don't want him just sitting there twiddling his thumbs and feeling bad. His character's a zombie right now. Hey, here's the zombie stat block. Try to kill the rest of the party.
and he
And
had
like
a great time trying.
he had a fantastic time, but it's the goal of the GM is to keep the players engaged and interested in what's happening at the table. And one of the best ways you can do that as a GM, especially if a character like drops early in a fight, is to go, okay, do you want to play some of the monsters? Cool. Here's the stat block for them. Here, this is
Yeah,
the general goal of what they're trying to do. Have fun.
and and I think this is definitely going to be more of a free-form episode than we've done because we're just all over the place. But the core concept is character death. Hang on a second. I had to sneeze, and I was like, I'm not going to do it in Anko's ear. And I was hoping you would be talking as I was about to sneeze, so I could just quietly mute and let you talk. But it didn't work out that way.
Nope.
All right.
No. Yeah. Well, to talk on character death properly, and actually, like, set the groundwork before we dig too farther into this hole. Character death in RPGs, like, usually this is something that's implied by the system where you're playing as to how it's going to be handled. Like when we're playing Shadow of the Demon Lord, especially early on, characters can drop fairly easily. So, you go in with the expectation that, yeah, my character could die fairly out of nowhere. I'm coming in mentally prepared for that. While if you're playing something like modern D&D where characters are fairly robust, the odds of death happening outside of it being like a deliberate character moment are a lot lower.
I
And so people
feel
tend to get
too.
more invested in their characters right
Yeah,
off the bat.
I was going to say I feel too that it's not only is it more common in Shadow of the Demon Lord, we were all halfway expecting it right from the beginning. It was very much a case of how long can this character last? So when I was brainstorming like the new character, I've yet to create, but the story concepts are there. I joked that what if he's deliberately like he has resurrectionist immortality almost, and we're like, yep, that works. So I can just bring him back in a different body, so I don't have to do any of the actual character spots. Just recreate a new body for him.
Because generally speaking, in more character focus, like we're playing a standard old school mega dungeon, those are not character focused. The focus of those adventures is the dungeon itself.
It's the encounters that you're having and playing with the people, which again is a great time, and I really enjoy it. But as
Hmm.
someone who also really enjoys the role play aspect, this allows me to. I think we were talking about this before. It allows you to flex that creative itch more with your own stuff than it does otherwise just creating a bland barbarian 13 with a giant hammer. Like, cool,
Yeah.
barbarian 13 is going to be fun, but if I want to role play a little bit, I can, well, what if I just do this and this? It tweaks it just enough that I don't need to constantly come up with a new character that I'm going to end up getting invested in. So it's one of those situations where it works for us or for you as a DM and me as the player. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for everyone who maybe they like creating new characters and running until they die. So obviously you see how that pans out down the road, but for the most part, it's
Hmm.
I'm not hurting anyone by having like the same character keep coming back after he dies, especially if he dies violently.
I mean, you definitely hurt some characters with the way you died this time, but that's the exception to the rule.
Yeah, that wasn't deliberate.
But no, in more character focused games, like games that are like not about an overarching plot outside of them or a specific location, but focused on the characters themselves and like their growth and their backstories and all that stuff. Character death tends to be a lot less frequent just
Mm.
because it it interrupts the focus of the game. Because if you're playing, Sir Periwinkle, and you have this big involved backstory about him and his family drama, and we're exploring that at the table, if Sir Periwinkle dies, then all of that narrative engagement that we had and all that stuff that we're excited to dig into just disappears unless we can figure out some justification for bringing him back. So
Yeah,
in a game like that, character death is rarely even on the table a lot of the times because it's not conducive to the type of game you're trying to play.
no, and I feel like at that point you would, if the character does happen to die, well then there's resurrection spells you can employ, right? There are different options you have to
Yeah.
very literally just bring him back. And in some ways that can be a subplot as well, is that, oh hey, Sir Periwinkle died, no worries, we might have a resurrection thing around here somewhere, let's go look for it.
Yeah, and then you can have like a side session where you're trying to bring the beloved character back, and their player can either play another character for one session or be involved in some other way. But
For the
in
most part.
character,
So yeah, so
yeah,
Periwinkle himself is gone up until he's not.
yeah. And there's a few systems I've played where character death literally can't happen outside of the player explicitly giving permission for it to happen.
Oh, oh, that would be interesting.
Yeah, it's I can't think of the specific names of any of them offhand because I've just been reading a lot lately.
Yeah,
But there's at least there's a couple that just the focus of the RPG has nothing to do with combat or situations where death would ever really be appropriate outside of narrative decision.
right.
And then there's games where that are they generally do tend to be more character focused, where it's okay, do you want the character to die here? Okay, then the character goes out in their moment of glory. Otherwise, we figure out some narrative justification for they may have been you know severely injured and taken out of the fight, but they're still alive, or they may have been maimed, or they're still alive, or they may have been like separated from the group, and for whatever reason they're negatively impacted that way. But you know, death
They're
is
not.
not a valid consequence, but all other consequences are still on the table.
Yeah, they're not dead. They just can't interact right now, which for all intents and purposes is effectively the character death.
Yeah, there's one really fun one, which why can't I think of the name right now? It's the game mechanic is played with a Jenga tower, and
Oh,
it's meant for like one-off horror games where every time the players want to attempt something that has the risk of something happening, they have to pull a Jenga block out and put it on top. And if the Jenga tower collapses, then their character meets a gruesome end. But it
that
also
is
has the option of if they really want what they want to do to succeed, they can knock over the tower, in which case, yes, their character does die, but their character, goes out doing like the heroic last stand, or goes out, making this pivotal moment for the rest of the characters, or they can choose to embrace their character dying to gain that narrative benefit.
that's a fascinating story or a narrative technique, because I feel like if you're not good at Jenga, you're going to be screwed anyway.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that
Dread,
people
that's what it's
listening
called.
know what Jenga is, and I'm not going to take the time to explain what Jenga is. But
No,
yeah,
you've got the internet. You can Google
one could argue that that's the whole point of the show, is to avoid them having to use the internet. But
it. Yeah, for RPGs, Jenga's not an RPG. We're fine.
yeah, valid. Oh man. Um. Okay, so we've talked about what happens when you die. What if you're a player and you're playing with a DM who wants to kill your characters, like for whatever reason, that maybe they're done playing as a DM and they just want the story to end and no one wants to take over. Like, right, I'm going to kill everyone. It's your job to stay alive as long as you can.
Hmm.
Has that happened to you in your experience, or is it just a situational thing where eventually someone might try and murder everyone, but maybe not?
Well, I personally have only experienced the killer GM once.
Okay.
Generally speaking, they're not very fun because it's a GM, no matter how fair they want to play, ultimately the GM is in control of the world, and if they want the characters to die, then there's a reason there was the joke. I'm assuming it still happens nowadays. I don't know. I haven't heard it in like a decade, but okay, rocks fall, everyone dies because the GM can just do that. So playing an antagonist or a killer GM that's deliberately trying to go out of their way to kill the party, in a lot of ways, it's just kind of okay. Like, why are you trying to do this? Like, if you just want to like try to kill the party, you're going to succeed. You're the GM. There's nothing we can literally do to stop that. But if the idea is like, hey, I want to challenge these characters until they drop, that's
That's
that's a
different.
fine yeah that's a fine game to play, assuming everybody's on board with that and the
Yeah,
GM's not just had a bad day at work and wants to take it out on the other people at the table.
I remember playing the very first experience I had with actual D&D, 10 plus years ago, long before I met you.
Hmm.
We I wasn't able to commit to go every week, and I think it was starting to frustrate the other. And I get it. Like it was in the middle of summer, and I had summer things to do, and so I was trying to go as often as I could. And my friend at the end said, "Look, I don't mean to be mean." He said, "I just don't think this is for you." I'm like, "No, I think you're right." I said, "I love playing it and I'm enjoying it, but I just can't commit 5 hours every Sunday night when." At the time, we were in the middle of like my wife and I would always hang out with friends on Sundays, and that had been a long-standing arrangement. And it was tough to just
Mm-hmm.
try and work something new in like that. So, but before the character at the time, we just quietly, cancelled him out or whatever. They just said, I'll figure out a way that reason that he's not there. But ironically, it was also a perfect time for him to step away because it was a very organized total party kill because everyone was getting tired of the characters they were playing. They wanted a reset, like a soft reboot.
Mm.
And the idea was they're going to fail at fighting this massive big bad. And this is all agreed upon ahead of time. But because the DM was trying to be fair, he was allowing people to roll it out. So we were having fun failing, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, in what amounted to essentially a nuclear blast, I jokingly hid my dumb barbarian behind a rock. And the guy's like, you know what? I'm going to let you roll this just to see if it'll work. I'm like, oh, the idea was he was going to die, but sure.
Yeah.
I rolled a natural 20. And he's like, I don't. Okay, so your idiot barbarian somehow survived a nuclear blast by hiding behind a rock. And he's like, all right, so this is a thing. Now, everyone else died but me because I hid behind a rock.
Mm.
And we didn't know how to handle that. Now, ironically enough, I ended up not having to find out how to handle that. But it was just one of those things where it, for me, it was hilarious that we tried to kill the party and failed because the barbarian rolled a 20.
That is the beauty of rolling the dice. Well, that
Yep.
does actually make for a good segue into generally what to do if a player can't make a session. Because I know in general, very 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 bad form unless they've explicitly agreed to it beforehand. If a player is not at a session, you cannot kill their character. Either their character is away from the party for some reason, they're just kind of, tagging along behind, generally not doing anything, but also not being focused by anything. But targeting somebody's character who is not at that session It's just a
not
shitty thing
idea.
to do.
Yeah, I it, I wish I could say I was surprised that that happened, but I'm sure. Now, in fairness, and I had no issue with this when I was out doing a bunch of stuff for the in the store, and there was a thing that came up where no, I had gone to Tim's for me and me and the owner,
Yeah.
and I came back and like, hey, Jeff didn't kill your character. I'm like, what? Like, it's like, but you rolled well. I'm like, oh shit, I didn't even think that was an option that he might die while I'm not here.
Yeah, that was an interesting one, which I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to call it first, but because like I didn't notice you leave, so by the time I had narrated the situation your character was in, it was like, oh, Alex isn't here. Um,
Crap.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
it was actually you and ironically the other Clockwork going down. You two were taking point. You guys had explicitly said that you were leading the party through the dungeon, and
Yep.
there was a pit trap that you both had to roll for to avoid falling into. That was actually the first time the other Clockwork nearly died, because he nearly died like 4 times that session before
How
finally
he
dying to you
survived
exploding.
that long, I don't know.
Oh my god, it was something. But
Yeah.
it was like, okay, like I don't I've already narrated the situation and I can't think of a valid reason for your character to suddenly not have to deal with this, and you're going to be back in a couple of minutes, and the odds of him actually dying from this are pretty much nil. Like, I wouldn't have let your Clockwork actually die
It
while
would
you
have
weren't
just
there.
been damage.
It,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it would have been like, okay, you're pretty banged up, but you're doing okay. Because I'm not gonna say, hey, oh, you left for 5 minutes, your character's dead, roll a new one.
yeah,
No.
exactly. Ironically, I had to do that anyway, but at the time, you want to try and make.
It was unrelated. But as from a GM's perspective, especially, you have to be careful with like if you don't know your group very well, and even if you do know your group, if you don't know how they handle their character dying, you have to be kind of careful with it.
Mm,
Because I've had players like actually have to like step away from the table because they were having like a bit of a breakdown over their character dying, because some people get very very heavily invested into their character, and then when they die it can almost feel like actually losing somebody.
yep.
And that that's something that you have to be careful for as a GM, because if you have players that are in that mindset, either you need to talk to them before anything happens. You need to make
I,
sure that, okay, character death is off the table for this game because we're playing a really character focused game that you guys want to embody and be these characters and like project yourselves into these characters. Or sometimes it does just honestly boil down to, this isn't the right game for you, I'm sorry.
yeah. And the thing is that so when it was a clockwork silverback gorilla who wasn't full size, so we were saying how I kept imagining him being massive, but he was actually smaller than a regular human.
Mhm.
When he finally died, I was like, oh shit. I was more annoyed at the backstory created from before he became a clockwork was invalid, and then when I said that never came up, I can just make that the new guy's backstory, given that
Yep.
he's also going to be a clockwork. And then at that point, it's a okay. Well, now I'm kind of sad about the name. Everything else was rolled, so it was randomly generated. Whatever.
Yeah, and that's being able to take those character pieces is actually it's a fantastic way of kind of mitigating that, because like you said, those backstory bits that you were really interested in kind of exploring hadn't actually come up at the table yet, and since they hadn't been introduced into the fiction, it's really easy to just take that chunk of the character and stick it into the new one, because if it hasn't come up, then it hadn't happened, and you're not actually repeating anything.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those moments where you can just um figure, take what you enjoyed and carry on. Now, it was unique for me in that it being a encounter driven game we're playing. it's not a big deal if I just like, yeah, whatever, we'll just take this, take that, take this, take that. No one's really going to be all that upset, and and that'll be fine.
Yeah, and there is something to be said too, especially like in older games. Like you did get, oh, Bob's dead. Here's Bob the Second. Continue playing. Generally not a play style I prefer. Like when we were talking about you bringing in another Clockwork and attaching the backstory that hadn't come up from your old Clockwork onto it, for me it was I'm fully okay with that. I would appreciate it not being exactly the same characters. Like I don't want to see another Clockwork Silverback Gorilla with the Rogue Path. But if you change up a couple of those elements and like make them feel like a fresh character, then yeah, by all means, keep playing a Clockwork. Attach that
Yeah,
backstory or take the stuff that you wanted to keep. Just I would prefer not having the exact same characters show up because that makes death meaningless, and I don't
it
really enjoy
trivializes
that.
it. It
Yeah.
it's an argument that we've had about comics for so long, is that when a character dies, you're like, okay, so when are they coming back? Because
Oh,
so many times a character dies and comes back that it's just meaningless. At least now with Jean Grey, it's literally part of the story because she is the Phoenix who is designed to die and come back and die and come back.
yeah.
But
But then you
it's
get
not,
characters like Uncle Ben.
yeah, he should stay dead. So I think when it comes to recreating a character, again, like it's one of those, yes, it's going to be a clockwork. No, it's not going to be a gorilla shaped clockwork. The, my whole plan is that when he inevitably dies again, it's almost like he'll just return in a new clockwork body. So I can continuously play a slightly different version of the same guy without having to think too much about it, given the
Hmm.
nature of the game is that I'm expecting him to die a lot.
Yeah, and it's also, real life concerns as well, where, like you mentioned earlier, generally speaking, you're working in the shop while we're playing, so it's not really conducive for you or for the group to have a character that has to be like really invested and involved in the story for what's going on, because there will be periods while we're playing where you just can't interact at the table, and we need to be able to keep playing when that happens.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's so whenever we roll up a character, we always try and make, well, let's play a dumb character so he doesn't understand what's going on. Because half the time I don't, and this way it saves you from having to explain what's going on. Because if I have a lineup and I'm talking to someone about what they're looking to read, etc., I'm focusing on that and not paying attention to the table at all.
Yeah,
Right? Like,
that's
and it's one of those things where we understood that's what's going to happen, and I would rather play off a dumb character and say, well, this is what I would do based on what I know at the time. Is there anything I should know that the character would know that I've missed? I'm like, no. All right, this is what I don't. This is what I've done. Okay, so that was the worst thing you could have done. Oh, of course.
yeah, and like similarly, like the owner plays with us as well in the same group at the same time, and his characters are generally even less involved with what's going on than yours are, because
And
he he's
he'll often
he's
play
there for,
support.
yeah, or like healers or cooks or
Yeah,
something that doesn't need to be in the front making proactive decisions that affect the group, because he's literally not there to make those decisions, and it's not fair to him as a character for us to say, oh, your character has decided to do this and your character is advocating for this. But it's also
exactly.
not fair to the group of, hey, we need you to make a decision. You've been gone and busy for an hour. That's like a third of our game time gone.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an understand, like a, again, the social contract that we touched on before. It's the understanding
Mm,
that I am not going to be 100% present. I arguably am more present than the owner because he's often in the basement doing stuff up and down, up
hmm
and down. I tend to just man the counter for the most part, so it's much more you know, it's more okay for me to play more of a frontline character who just doesn't know what's going on than it would be the owner who, well, I'll play support, and then at least that way you can, if he hasn't been around for a couple hours, well, the character is here. This person does need healing. What if we just roll for him and see what happens? and you're
Yeah,
not
and like we don't need to worry about, oh no, his character is like, his character's up front swinging his sword and he got bitten by the dragon. No, it's his character's hanging out near the back. If
Mhm.
somebody desperately needs healing, then it's okay. His character like run up and like cast a healing spell or use a potion on
Exactly.
them or something like that.
It's
He's functionally like a hireling in a lot of ways. But
it, and I think it works because when he can commit, he's fully invested in and
yes.
he's there. But if it's a busy night for either of us, it allows us that ability to bounce back and forth. And I think that's why, in some ways, playing a dumb, simplistic character for me, if I'm not there, so well, the goblin would attack, so I guess we're gonna enter into a random fight.
Yeah, it's
So
one of the nice things about, because you play those such straightforward characters, it makes it really easy for us as the rest of the group to go, okay, what would he do in this situation? Yeah, it's fairly obvious what he would do in this situation. We can just fill him in on the details of what happens when he gets back, because he'll agree with this.
100. I don't think there's been a single time where I haven't agreed with it, or I would. I think I said at one point, he would have done that, but not because of this, but because of this. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I'm like, either way, outcome's the same.
Yeah,
So,
it works really well,
yeah,
honestly, all things considered.
agreed. Sorry, I stood up for a second. My cat's on my chair, so I'm currently
Fighting
chairless.
back.
No, I just let them have it. Honestly,
Oh, and I'm never sitting when we're recording these. I've been pacing my house for the last hour.
that's actually kind of amusing. No, I tend to sit. This is what happened. This is one of those moments, folks, where we forget we're recording sometimes, and there we go.
Yep.
Probably
But
not
yeah,
news for those of you who listen to the other shows. So that being said,
or earlier episodes of this one. Let's be honest.
yeah, valid. All right. So character death. The show notes are a mess because we've been all over the place, and yet at the same time, it kind of has worked for the nature of what we're talking about.
Hmm.
Um, I was getting distracted by the title of the show, and that is ultimately irrelevant because I haven't figured it out yet.
We're great at this.
You think we'd know what we're doing by now.
Right.
Um, yeah. So what was I going to say? Oh, words of failing. Words of failing. I think when it comes to character death, we've covered a bunch of like, yes, it can be fun in the right ways. It can be fun, and I think when you're playing with a group who's on the same page, losing a character is sad for everyone.
Hmm.
Maybe less so when you're just starting out in the first session and someone dies and we're like, oh, I honestly didn't even know what you were playing. Like when I stole the character sword from the player who died, I didn't know what he was playing. Genuinely had no idea because you hadn't really had any interaction with them. And it was only as we were going through that I was, oh wait, you're an orc, you're a dwarf. Okay, you were some now you're a fancy orc, and it was just one of those moments where I don't know what this is. So we ended up it's not being connected to the character was ultimately one of those moments. I'm like, whatever.
That's also generally why I've started, and I don't know if you've really noticed this with paying attention working in the shop, but it's why I've really started at the start of most sessions doing the whole, all right, round table, character's name, what their
Yep.
ancestry is, one random fact about them,
Because
because it just
otherwise you
it gr-
don't.
it grounds you at the table.
Yeah, like otherwise you can be there at the table and like, oh wait, which one of you is an orc? Oh, we're all orcs. What?
But
I thought it was just
what?
one of you.
How long has that been a thing?
Yeah, I thought you were goblins.
And it's also kind of fun just thinking about the, because of saying character ancestry, one unique thing about them. It's also really interesting for me as the GM, and I'm hoping the players will start to see this as we keep doing it, is that as you get to know your character better and as things have happened and explored, what people will bring up as one unique thing about them will change,
Mm-hmm.
because like, oh, and yeah, and he's fight because at the start it's like, oh, he's one unique thing about him, he has a great sword. And then as you start getting more deeper into it, it's like, oh yeah, this is Grog. He's a ogre, and his one unique thing is that he's desperately trying to avenge the loss of his wife, and
Yeah.
because
It,
you and then everybody at the table is aware of that,
hmm
and that's in their mind when they're playing, and so it's not just, oh, this is Charlie's character, I think he's playing an ogre. It's, oh right, this is Grog, and he's doing his revenge trip. This is, we can work this in, and I can work this into what I'm doing with my character.
it, it kind of reminds me in some ways. I assume you've seen the movie Tangled, and if you haven't, you should.
Yes.
The scene where they go into the Ugly Duckling Tavern, and and you have Vladimir that collects little porcelain unicorns or something like that. I'm like,
Mhm.
every time you bring up the interesting fact, I'm like, uh, you know, one of the guys is just looking for a love connection. One of the guys is collects unicorns or wants to dance or something. I'm like, every time you bring up, I'm like, this is a time to bring up the most inane fact possible that actually makes sense for the character.
Yeah, and like it promotes a lot of like interesting role play, because then, like,
Hmm
if your character brought up that, oh yeah, I like to collect tiny little unicorn figurines, if for whatever reason we're in the dungeon and a little unicorn figurine comes up, you can guarantee somebody in the group is going to go, oh, that's for Alex's character.
Yeah,
Like his
it,
character would love that little unicorn.
it's one of the throwaway lines I had about when we created the goblin way back when. Ben is, oh, he likes to collect teeth. Well, that became has become a core defining function of Ben, is that
And
he
like,
likes to collect teeth, and the character is like, oh god, that monster has interesting teeth. Hide it from Ben.
yeah,
Don't
like
let Ben see.
it became more about than just Ben. Like, the entire party had their own reactions to it, and their own, like, decisions were made solely around, oh no, that thing has giant teeth. There's no way we're going to be able to stop Ben from fighting that thing.
Yeah, exactly. And
And like, and with my character, like, my character was playing, well, my character was a paladin of the goddess of the arts, and it was like, okay, on one hand, this is macabre and disturbing, but on the other hand, like, Ben is making honestly kind of genuine works of art with these teeth that he's collecting, and as somebody who's following the goddess of the arts, I kind of feel like I have to encourage this, but also encourage it in a way that's not like actively ruining other creatures'
and the
lives.
it ended up working out in this case for the story in that your character said, "Oh, Ben, do this for me, and I'll help you get like mythical monster teeth," and that has now allowed us to not have Ben run off at any last possible moment to get teeth, where he looks for approval first, shaking with anticipation before finally becoming the murder goblin.
Yep. Oh god, I can't wait to get back to that one.
I do enjoy that one.
It's probably going to
Um,
be like at least a year, but
it's
I'm looking forward to getting back to
crazy
that one.
how long it can take, especially when you're doing different things. We've gone drastically off topic yet again. I think we've covered character death, not extensively, but anecdotally fairly in depth. There's
Yeah.
always going to be more that you can say about any of these subjects, and realistically, you add another person to the mix, there's going to be a whole new level of conversation to it. So I'm I don't really have any other thoughts at this point, because otherwise we're going to tangent off significantly into something entirely different. And I know
Uh,
you're looking. Well, wait. Do you have to? I can't remember what time you said you had to run, but I realized it
I've
may not be.
I've I've got a solid hour left. I'm not
Okay.
too worried in that front. Although I went quiet because I was trying to remember. It's like, wait, where we're hosting these? Like, are listeners able to leave comments, or is it just like a
I
listen and
think.
go? Because like,
Ah.
if
Do you know what? I think so. I think it is on YouTube at some point. It's so, folks. If you have comments, the best way to get a hold of us is readynerdgo@gmail.com. It's very much a case of we don't get notifications for comments or anything like that on the posts and things like that as it comes up, just purely by virtue of the nature of how it's being posted up. We don't control the graphic policy account. We don't get notifications on that. So it's not that we don't respond if you do leave a comment, it's that we just don't know. Again, so ReadyNerdGo is the best way to get a hold of us at gmail.com. It's exactly as it sounds. I don't know how I was able to get that email address or why that was still available, but there we go.
You rhymed that off quick. Yeah, I mean, honestly, with the time delay between episodes, by the time y'all hear this, we may have fully figured this out and be actively talking to people. Who bloody knows? But
Yeah,
reason I was thinking about it is, hey, if we do have a comment system on it, and y'all are listening to this, and if you have an interesting character death that you had, throw it in the comments. It'd be
I would,
always fun to
yeah.
read.
And that's the thing, like, don't, like, the reason if we are getting comments, the reason we're not addressing them on the show currently is that we're recording, this is episode 8 we're recording. I think
Yep.
episode 5 came out last week, so episode 6 is probably coming out in a week, right? So we do it every 2 weeks, so there's going to be a delay. We record ahead because it's not really a time specific thing. It is what it is. We both also know that we can be busy, so we did decide on, anyway. It's behind the curtain, irrelevant.
Yet another tangent.
Yeah, fact of the matter is, if you email us, we will respond eventually. I'm looking at the inbox right now. I was like, has anyone actually sent us anything? No, they haven't, because I don't actually think the announcement for the email address.
Did we forget to do that entirely?
We didn't set up the email address until we were at least 4 or 5 episodes in. So while I've put it in the notes, we haven't actually spoken about it on the show in any kind of depth. So yeah, that's that. So yeah, I think this is probably as good a place to end as any, given that we don't really have any specific plans for this episode. If you're still listening, thank you. Keep an eye out on the titles of the shows, folks. There may or may not be something that you're going to want to be aware of for that down the road.
Yes.
We may or may not be playing a long game. We're totally playing a long game. So no, us in an RPG centric thing, playing a long game, no. So, but yeah, until the next time, if you've listened this far, thank you. We are going to put a giant sword in the thing right now, a spear in the thing now, and possibly come back to character death when we've had some more interesting stories. We'll find out. We'll see what happens. We have no plans for next episode, so we're not going to tease that, because it can be more fun when we don't know. We'll see what happens.
That's the fun.
And until next time,
game on.
Hey, thanks for watching Board Game today. We always appreciate your views and your support, but there are so many ways for you to support our site. Not only can you do right here on video, but you can go and check us out at boardgametoday.com, where we have more news, reviews, interviews, everything you could ever want. But since you're here, if you could, you can always give us a like, subscribe, or share our videos, or watch something else. Is always much appreciated, and get your game on.